We've come near the end of our show, only 2 segments left. First off, we have a segment on the first annual Jim Green Memorial Lecture Series, started by Joe Hall. It will be held every year this time at the SFU Woodward Center. Our guest speaker this year was Ken Lyotier. He's the person who started up United We Can. He's been very active in our community building, even received a national medal for it. I believe it was the Order of Canada. And at the end, during the credits, we'll just show you a little bit about the Chinese New Year's parade. So off for now. We'll see you all next month. Bye-bye.
I sometimes think, when I think of how we are together, about flocks of birds and schools of fish and herds of animals, and how they seem to be able to navigate and move together. If you think of flocks of birds, I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched them, I'm sure you have. They seem to be able to fly around without smashing into one another. I gather the reason that animals do that, school together and flock together, is a defense mechanism to protect them from predators. The reason I bring that up is I suspect that we're all kind of like that too. We may have more complex sort of factors that we have to gauge in terms of how we move about together, but in the end of the day, we're animals too, and we've got to navigate through this life and, I guess, survive the predators. By 1978, I was essentially too sick to hold down a full-time job. I had virtually no social life apart from drinking in beer parlors, and mostly I drank alone. I'm sharing all of this not for any sort of sympathy vote, but just like it's a fact of how I arrived in the downtown east side. So I think that it's important to know that many of the folks that are my friends and neighbors in the downtown east side arrived here for all kinds of real circumstances. And, you know, people say, why the hell are people living in those SROs in the downtown east side? And why don't they just pull up their socks and get out there and get a job? Well, you know, as you start to find out the circumstances of many of us, there's other reasons. I recognized that I had an addiction problem. I didn't call it an addiction problem, but I just had this affinity for booze and drugs. And I recognized it as a problem in the 70s, and I went for help, and I met others who were finding a way through that. But even there, at that point in time, I didn't feel close to people. I was quite alienated and disconnected. In 1986, I became very sick again. I went back into hospital. I went through a lot of messy procedures and ended up sort of in a circumstance that I was apparently going to live on a tube feeding me, which I didn't know how that was going to work out. But in any event, they said that I wouldn't be allowed out unless I had a place that had its own bathing and washroom facilities. At the time, Jim had been working with Dira on the development of the Four Sisters Co-op, and I got a place in Four Sisters. I moved in before they even had their occupancy permit, sort of haunting the place, eh? And it was my salvation. It stabilized my life, and I can't speak loudly enough to how important having a place, a secure place to be, is in stabilizing people's lives here or anywhere. And I also discovered binning big time. I was a dumpster diver, and I was a sober dumpster diver at a time when dumpster diving wasn't the popular sport that it's become today. And actually, people were quite discreet when they go out dumpster diving. They'd sort of hide what they were doing, and I certainly was part of that in the beginnings, but I loved it. And I got to the point that I really didn't give a damn what anybody thought. I was out there digging in the garbage, and it was totally cool. And I was actually making a little bit of money at it. I was putting money under my mattress and hiding it from welfare. The problem was that there was so much stuff that you couldn't get back through the stores. It wasn't in the deposit refund system. And I had a friend who used to dumpster dive, and we were sitting in the dugout one day, and I was kibitzing with him, and we were grinding on our complaints about the system. And a friend from First United, Barry Morris, heard us, and he said, well, you know, if you guys want to do something about this, I think I might know where there's a little bit of cash that you could put towards some event or something that you could do. So we cooked up this scheme to do a one-day event in Victory Square where we would pay people to bring what in those days were non-refundable containers to Victory Square, up to the tune of $10 worth, and we put little handbills on all the dumpsters in downtown Vancouver, and we handed them out in the soup lines and the bread lines and the welfare lines, wherever we thought that people might get this. But we had nary a clue of who might know about this or think about this, because it wasn't visible. Binning wasn't visible in those days. Not very visible anyway. On the day of the event, which was like a month later, we arrived at Victory Square with our little strong box with the cash that Barry had brought to us. And it was actually part of a trust fund that Barry had set up with an inheritance. But anyway, we had $1,500. And we arrived at Victory Square, and people were lined up around Victory Square and up Pender Street, up the next street over Homer, I think. And it was like a land office business, eh? We ended up with a huge pile of bottles in Victory Square, and it was like, wow, this is so cool. And people knew how to do it. They knew how to do it, eh? They knew how to sort bottles, how to count bottles, and how to get paid for it. And it was a good day. A good time was had by all. And way more happened out of that event than one could have bought for $1,500, frankly. It was a dead loser as a business, eh? Because these were all non-refundable containers. We had to actually pay to get them hauled to the recycling yard. And I should say, you know, after our efforts at United We Can, today, yeah, we're moving on to new digs, but at the same time, we're recycling 20+ million containers a year and putting out 2.5 million a year to people. So from that $1,500, we got a lot of return over a long period of time. Clap for yourselves. Remember that flock of birds, you know? It wasn't, you know, oftentimes that's one of the problems. People think, oh, you did. I didn't, you know. I was part of a big group of people that did all sorts of amazing things. These folks from the street with their cans and bottles and bringing them, and again, this whole thing of people got it, you know. The word was out on the street. They brought their cans and bottles together. We ended up with a huge pile of containers in a square in downtown Montreal. And it taught me something about legacy and community development and carrying on, that it isn't about this place that we're in. It's about us. You know, this is the legacy. We're it. This is the main act, you know. It isn't about the church. It isn't about the casino. It isn't about the convention center or even the housing, though without the housing, it's pretty slim pickings, eh? It's about us and how we build from where we're at together into a future that only we can do. It isn't like there's going to be this magic force that comes in and fixes it all for us. It's up to us. And I'm absolutely confident that united we can.